The story of the Avatar cycle begins not with power, glory, or mastery, but with a single man's desperate bid for survival. His name was Wan, and through him the balance of the world was forever altered. Wan lived in an era when humans did not yet roam freely across the continents. Instead, they cowered within the confines of great fortified cities built upon the backs of lion turtles. Each lion turtle granted its human tenants the ability to bend one element when they ventured outside, for the world beyond their protective walls was wild, perilous, and dominated by spirits. Wan was born in the city atop the lion turtle that granted fire. His childhood was marked by hunger and struggle. In those days, the distribution of food and resources was cruelly unequal. The ruling classes enjoyed plenty, while the poor scraped by with meager rations. Wan grew up among the outcasts of the streets, dreaming of a life beyond the oppressive walls. Though small and often underestimated, he possessed a reckless bravery and a cunning mind. When he came of age, Wan volunteered to join the hunting parties that left the safety of the city walls. To do so, he was temporarily granted the gift of firebending by the lion turtle. With this power, he and others could defend themselves from spirits or dangerous beasts during their excursions. Yet Wan had little interest in hunting. His true ambition was escape. He longed for freedom from the cruelty of his city's hierarchy. On his first expedition, Wan feigned cowardice and abandoned the hunt, retreating deeper into the wilderness. There, he stole the fire he had been given, refusing to return it. When the hunt ended, banished for his transgression, Wan fled into the vast spirit wilds, alone, unprepared, and with only fire as his ally. His chances of survival seemed slim, yet Wan's defiance became his strength. He learned to live among spirits and animals, mastering firebending not as a weapon of domination, but as a tool of harmony. In time, he even befriended spirits who recognized his courage and compassion. The boy who had been cast out as a thief began to grow into a leader, but Wan's journey was far from peaceful. While exploring the wilderness, he stumbled upon a cosmic struggle, the eternal battle between two great spirits, Rava, the embodiment of light and peace, and Vatu, the spirit of darkness and chaos. Believing Rava to be tormenting Vatu, Wan intervened and freed the dark spirit from her grasp. It was a fateful mistake. Without Rava's restraint, Vatu's malevolence spread unchecked, upsetting the delicate balance of the world. Realizing the gravity of what he had done, Wan allied himself with Rava to undo the chaos. Together, they sought power from each of the lion turtles, learning fire, air, water, and earth in turn. Unlike other humans, Wan did not relinquish these gifts. Instead, through Rava's presence within him, the elements merged, making him the first human capable of wielding all four. Their journey culminated in the harmonic convergence, a celestial event that pitted Rava and Wan against Vatu in a battle to determine the fate of the world. Their struggle shook the very fabric of reality. Wan, fused permanently with Rava, defeated Vatu and imprisoned him within the Tree of Time. Thus the Avatar was born, a bridge between humans and spirits, a living balance between light and darkness. Wan's triumph came at great cost though. Revered as the first Avatar, his life remained difficult. He dedicated his remaining years to bringing peace between humans and spirits, often standing alone in the face of endless conflict. Despite his power, he could not prevent every war, nor reconcile all divisions. On his deathbed, Wan lamented that the world was still broken, still fragile. But he entrusted the mission to his successors, knowing Rava would be reborn again and again in the cycle of elements. Wan's story is remembered not as one of perfection, but of perseverance. He was a thief and exile, a man who erred greatly, yet through courage and sacrifice, he became the bridge upon which all future avatars would stand. When Wan passed away and Rava carried his spirit into the next life, the Avatar cycle was set into motion for the first time. With each reincarnation, the Avatar would be born into a new nation, mastering the elements in sequence. Fire gives air, gives water, gives earth. But here lies one of the great mysteries of history. In the span of 10,000 years, countless avatars lived and died, yet only a fraction of their names are remembered. While avatars such as Kyoshi, Roku, Aang, and Korra are household names, there are hundreds more whose legacies are no longer recorded in scrolls or songs. Their triumphs and struggles were swallowed by time, leaving only faint traces. Among these early, almost forgotten figures, three stand out, their names barely preserved in fragments of lore and ancient murals: Avatar Zalir, Avatar Gun, and Avatar Salai. Avatar Zalir, the Earth Kingdom Peacemaker's first avatar after Wan to be Remembered by name was Zalir, born into the Earth Kingdom during an age of constant tribal war. Humanity had spread across the continents by this point, leaving the lion turtles behind, but unity was still a distant dream. Zalir grew up in a fractured world where clans and warlords clashed endlessly over fertile land, rivers, and spiritual sites. As a child, Zalir saw villages burned and families torn apart by raids. By the time their avatar identity was revealed, the world longed desperately for stability. Unlike Wan, who relied on force and bold acts of defiance, Zalir was remembered for the art of diplomacy. Murals from crumbling Earth Kingdom temples show an avatar standing between rival chieftains, hands spread in peace. Zalir is believed to have spent much of their life traveling between hostile factions, using bending not to destroy, but to demonstrate balance. With each negotiation, Zalir tried to show people that strength was not measured in conquest, but in compromise. Though much of Zalir's biography is lost, some historians speculate that their work laid the earliest foundations for what would later become the Earth Kingdom's monarchical system, a society united under one banner instead of 100 feuding tribes. If true, then Zalir's quiet victories echoed far beyond their lifetime, shaping the very identity of an entire nation. Avatar Gun, the air nomad idealist. After Zalir, the cycle turned, and the next remembered avatar was Gun, born among the air nomads. While Zalir had worked to resolve conflicts among the Earth tribes, Gun inherited a world that remained divided. The four nations were slowly forming identities, but suspicion and rivalry lingered between them. Gun is remembered in scattered text as a visionary who dreamed of harmony across the entire world. Whereas many avatars focused on the needs of their own nations, Gun looked outward. He believed that the avatar should not only solve immediate crises, but also guide humanity toward lasting unity. Legends describe Gun as a wandering monk who visited distant villages, offering aid and teaching compassion. With airbending, he performed acts that seemed miraculous, redirecting storms, guiding travelers across mountains, calming violent spirits. His teachings emphasized detachment from greed and fear, mirroring the air nomad philosophy, but applied universally. While Gun's efforts did not erase conflict, history shows the nations continued to feud. They helped plant the idea of the avatar as a global guardian rather than a tribal leader. Later avatars, from Yangshan to Aang, would wrestle with the scope of this responsibility, and Gun's vision can be seen as one of the first sparks of that conversation. Avatar Salai, the water tribe in Avatar after Gun, the avatar cycle shifted once again, bringing Salai, a water tribe avatar. Unlike the vast, connected Earth Kingdom or the free-roaming air nomads, the water tribes of this era were small, scattered, and struggling for survival in harsh polar conditions. Salai grew up in the southern tribe, where life was defined by the ice, the sea, and the shifting moods of the spirits. Salai's legacy, though faint, is tied to waterbending itself. Oral traditions passed down in the southern tribe speak of an avatar who transformed bending from mere survival skill into a refined art. While waterbenders had long used their abilities to hunt or defend their villages, Salai showed how water could heal, protect, and even inspire beauty. Songs claim Salai could weave frozen bridges across vast chasms or pull moonlight into shimmering arcs of water during festivals. More importantly, Salai is said to have taught healers the deeper spiritual connection between the moon spirit and the ocean spirit, paving the way for the water healing techniques still practiced centuries later. In this sense, Salai's contribution was not just political but cultural, ensuring that bending arts evolved into something greater than tools of war. Spiritual authority. Aang was also a respected figure in the spirit world. Unlike many avatars who struggled to balance their mortal and spiritual roles, Yangshan excelled in both. Spirits recognized her as a mediator whose word carried legitimacy. Some even claimed that hostile spirits would back down at the mere mention of her name. This dual authority, political among humans, spiritual among spirits, made her unique. She was not merely a protector, she was a pillar of trust across both realms. Where one had established the avatar as a bridge, Yangshan embodied that bridge in its strongest form. The great avatar be the end of her life. Yangshan's reputation transcended her mortal deeds. Entire nations honored her memory, not only as a peacemaker, but as a symbol of justice and compassion. Shrines were erected in her honor, and her counsel was invoked by avatars centuries later. To the air nomads, she was proof that their people could lead not through detachment, but through compassionate involvement. To the Earth Kingdom and Fire Nation, she was remembered as the avatar who brought order without tyranny. To the spirits, She was the rare human who understood their needs as much as her own. Legosayankin's death was mourned across the world, but her presence never truly vanished. Avatars who followed her often sought her wisdom in moments of crisis. Even in the chaos of Sozin's war, her teachings were remembered. When Aang communed with her centuries later, she reminded him of the Avatar's ultimate sacrifice, not personal freedom, but service to the greater good. Yang Chen's story is not just of victories or defeats, but of sacrifice for peace. She accepted that her role demanded giving up personal happiness, comfort, and even spiritual liberation, so that humanity and spirits alike could flourish. It is no wonder she is remembered as the great Avatar, the one who bore the heaviest burdens with unshakable grace. While some avatars like Yang Chen are remembered for their wisdom and sacrifice, others are remembered more for their failures, or at least for what history believes were failures. Few avatars are as misunderstood as Avatar Kyoshi of the Northern Water Tribe. To later generations, Kyoshi was often dismissed as indulgent and lazy, a man who squandered the Avatar's gift on a life of pleasure. But behind that image lies one of the most tragic stories in the entire Avatar cycle, a life shaped by loss, cursed by endless battles in the spirit world, and defined by a burden few could have endured. A water tribe upbringing, Kyoshi was born into the Northern Water Tribe, centuries after Yang Chen's era of prosperity and stability. The water tribes were strong and united, their traditions intact, and their lands relatively safe compared to the turmoil of other nations. Unlike many avatars born into war, Kyoshi inherited a world that seemed largely at peace. From a young age, Kyoshi was gifted. He quickly mastered waterbending, displaying not only power but fluid creativity. His natural talent extended to other elements as well. By the time he was recognized as the Avatar, there was a sense of confidence among his people. The cycle had produced another strong leader, and surely he would maintain the peace. The appearance of a carefree Avatar as an adult. Kyoshi was tall, strong, and handsome. He was a warrior, a hunter, and a man admired by his peers. But unlike his predecessors, Kyoshi did not cultivate an image of solemnity or asceticism. He was often seen at feasts, surrounded by friends, indulging in drink, games, and storytelling. This image has dominated history's view of him. To later avatars, even to his own successor Kyoshi, Kyoshi appeared irresponsible, a man who preferred personal enjoyment over duty. The truth, however, was much darker. His seemingly carefree nature was less a reflection of his character than it was a shield against the unending suffering he endured. The shadow in the spirit world unbeknownst to most of the world. Kyoshi's lifetime was marked by an escalating crisis in the spirit world. Malevolent spirits were crossing into the human realm more frequently than in any era since Avatar Wan. But unlike Wan or Yang Chen, Kyoshi did not face spirits seeking dialogue or balance. What confronted him were monsters of corruption, vengeful, violent entities born from human greed and imbalance. Night after night, Kyoshi descended into battle. Armed with bending, weapons, and his avatar spirit, he hunted these creatures relentlessly. He fought not for glory, but in desperate defense of humanity. The world at large never saw these struggles. To ordinary people, peace seemed intact, but that peace came at the cost of Kyoshi's endless and lonely wars in the shadows. Each battle scarred him, body and soul. With every victory, he also felt himself weakening. His spirit grew weary. His connection to Ra was strained. These were wars no one else could see, and no one else could remember. The love and the loss. Kyoši's life reached its greatest tragedy in his marriage. He had fallen deeply in love with Umi, a woman of the water tribe known for her beauty and kindness. Their union was a source of joy in a life otherwise consumed by battle. But on the night of their wedding, catastrophe struck. As Kyoshi celebrated with his people, a dark spirit emerged and abducted Umi, dragging her into the spirit world. Kyoshi pursued, but even with his power he could not save her. His bride was lost forever, her soul imprisoned beyond his reach. This event broke him. What had already been a weary, burdened existence now became unbearable. Kyoshi never fully recovered from the loss of Umi, and it haunted him for the rest of his short life. A life of silent sacrifice. Kyoši's outward behavior, the drinking, the feasting, the reputation for recklessness, was in truth a mask. To his people, it looked like indulgence. In reality, it was a coping mechanism, a way to numb the grief and exhaustion that consumed him. He did not speak of his endless battles with spirits, nor did he share the torment of losing Umi. The world never knew the depth of what he carried. Unlike Yang Chen, who bore her burdens openly as a stateswoman and diplomat, Kyoshi bore his silently. Alone, his greatest deeds were invisible to the people he protected. His greatest sacrifices went unrecognized. The early death Kuruk's body, weakened by years of spiritual combat, began to fail him. He died young at the age of just 33. To the Water Tribe and the wider world, his passing seemed like the natural end of an indulgent and careless man. But in truth, Kuruk's early death was the result of his ceaseless battles in the spirit world. Even in death, he carried guilt. Before his spirit faded into the cycle, he left a message for his successor, Avatar Kyoshi. He admitted that he had failed to save his love, that he had made mistakes, and that his life was a warning, but he also passed on a lesson. The Avatar must be vigilant, for the weight of imbalance falls most heavily on them, and they may pay with more than their life. Legacy misunderstood for centuries, Kuruk was remembered unfairly. Tales of his feasting and indulgence overshadowed his sacrifices. Songs mocked his lack of discipline. Even Kyoshi, upon hearing of her predecessor, initially regarded him as a failure, but as more was revealed through her spiritual encounters with him and her own trials in the spirit world, the truth came to light. Kuruk was not a failed avatar, but a tragic one. He carried burdens unseen, fought wars unacknowledged, and gave his life in silence so others could live in peace. The tragedy of the Avatar's duty. Kuruk's story is perhaps the most poignant reminder of the Avatar's fate. Not every Avatar is remembered as a wise sage or a heroic warrior. Some are remembered wrongly, their legacies clouded by misunderstanding. Kuruk embodies the hidden cost of the Avatar's duty: sacrifice without recognition, struggle without reward, love lost without redemption. His tragedy is not just his early death or the loss of Ami, but the fact that the world never truly understood how much it owed him. Only within the Avatar cycle itself, in the memories passed from one incarnation to the next, does the truth of his sacrifice remain. Closing reflection. Kuruk's life stands in stark contrast to Yang Chen's, where she embraced the burden of diplomacy and was celebrated for it. Kuruk bore the burden of spiritual warfare and was scorned for it. Yet both, in their own way, gave everything to preserve balance. In the end, Kuruk may be the most human of all avatars, flawed, grieving, struggling against impossible odds, and tragically, never remembered for the battles he fought in the shadows. If Kuruk's life was one of tragedy, sacrifice, and quiet suffering, then his successor, Avatar Kyoshi, was his opposite in nearly every way. While Kuruk died young and was remembered falsely, Kyoshi lived to be over 230 years old, leaving behind one of the longest and most impactful legacies in the Avatar cycle. Her reign was not marked by quiet diplomacy or hidden battles in the spirit world, but by decisive, often brutal action in the human world. She was a warrior, a lawmaker, and a figure who reshaped entire nations with her uncompromising vision of justice. Kyoshi is often remembered as a towering figure, both literally and symbolically. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, she became a living embodiment of strength, endurance, and the Avatar's authority. But behind the legend was a woman forged in hardship, betrayal, and survival. To understand Kyoshi is to understand how pain and resilience created the Avatar who would leave an indelible mark on history. A childhood of hardship. Kyoshi's early life was anything but privileged. She was born in the Earth Kingdom, but not to noble families or stable communities. Her parents, Jessa and Hark, were outlaws, thieves who lived outside the law and survived by preying upon the weak. When they eventually abandoned her, young Kyoshi was left to fend for herself in poverty and isolation. As a child, she was tall, awkward, and painfully shy. She worked as a servant in the Avatar mansion, living among the retinue of another child. Believed to be the Avatar, during these years, she felt invisible, often overlooked or mocked for her ungainly size and timid nature. No one suspected that this neglected girl would one day wield the power of the Avatar spirit. This difficult beginning would shape Kyoshi's entire worldview. Having lived with betrayal and neglect, she developed a sharp instinct for survival. Having seen the hypocrisy of the rich and powerful, she nurtured a deep distrust of corrupt institutions. The true Avatar revealed when Kuruk passed away. The search for his successor was misdirected. A boy named Yun was identified as the Avatar, and he was raised and trained accordingly. Kyoshi remained a servant in his household, assisting with menial tasks. But fate had different plans. During a crucial moment, it was revealed that Kyoshi, not Yun, was the true Avatar. The revelation shook the Earth Kingdom's leadership and shattered Yun's life. For Kyoshi, it was equally terrifying. She had no training, no preparation, and no confidence in her role. She felt unworthy of the mantle thrust upon her, but destiny gave her little time to hesitate. The rise of the Kyoshi warriors. Kyoshi's journey into the Avatar's role was bloody and turbulent. Betrayed by those who had once claimed to protect her, she forged her own path, gathering allies who would become the foundation of her strength. Among them were Ranji, her loyal firebender bodyguard and eventual partner, and the outlawed Flying Opera Company, a band of thieves and mercenaries who became her earliest companions. Over time, Kyoshi transformed from a frightened servant girl into a formidable warrior. She mastered earth-bending and expanded her abilities into seismic power and uncheckable endurance. Her sheer physical strength was legendary. Even before entering the Avatar state, she could shift mountains of stone. From her example rose the Kyoshi warriors, an all-female fighting order who carried her legacy for centuries. Clad in green armor and painted with Kyoshi's iconic face markings, they embodied her philosophy, strength, discipline, and the protection of their homeland. The creation of Kyoshi Island. And of Kyoshi's most defining acts was the creation of Kyoshi Island. At the time, her homeland was under threat from foreign aggression, particularly from raiders and expansionist warlords. To protect her people, Kyoshi used her bending on a scale never before seen. Channeling the raw might of the Avatar, she separated an entire peninsula from the mainland, carving out a new island that would remain safe from invasion. This feat became both a symbol of her might and a practical legacy that endured for centuries. Kyoshi Island thrived as an independent community, fiercely loyal to its Avatar founder. The sheer audacity of her act, reshaping the geography of the Earth Kingdom itself, cemented her reputation as a figure who could not be ignored or opposed. An avatar of uncompromising justice like Yang Chen, who relied on diplomacy, or Kirik, who fought in shadows, Kyoshi's approach to balance was direct and merciless. She confronted corruption and tyranny with overwhelming force, unafraid to execute judgment personally. Perhaps the most famous example was her confrontation with Qin the Conqueror, a ruthless warlord who sought to dominate the Earth Kingdom. When words failed, Kyoshi unleashed her power. She split the land to create Kyoshi Island, and Qin fell to his death. History would later record him as Qin the Great, with some Earth Kingdom provinces venerating him as a martyr, but Kyoshi herself admitted without hesitation she killed him. This moment defined her philosophy. For Kyoshi, the Avatar's role was not to appease everyone or preserve fragile peace at any cost. It was to enforce justice, even if it required harsh measures. The longevity of Kyoshi. Of the most mysterious aspects of Kyoshi's life is her extraordinary lifespan. She lived to be 230 years old, far exceeding any known Avatar or ordinary human. The reasons remain unclear, whether it was due to spiritual fortitude, bending mastery, or her connection to the Avatar spirit. This longevity gave Kyoshi an unusually long reign as Avatar. For over 2 centuries, she guided the Earth Kingdom and influenced the world at large. Few rulers or leaders in history have held authority for so long, and her impact was correspondingly immense. Generations rose and fell under her watch. Laws were shaped, armies trained, and cultural traditions established with her oversight. The Kyoshi novels and expanded legacy modern exploration of Kyoshi's life has revealed even more depth. In The Rise of Kyoshi and The Shadow of Kyoshi, her journey is depicted in detail, from her struggles with insecurity and betrayal to her romance with Ranji, from her alliances with outlaws to her brutal confrontations with warlords and corrupted officials. These stories show not only Kyoshi's strength but her humanity. She was not born a fearless warrior. She was forged through suffering, mistakes, and hard choices. Her eventual confidence and power were earned through relentless trials. Kyoshi's philosophy at her core, Kyoshi believed in endurance. Life had abandoned her, betrayed her, and tested her in every way, but she survived and grew stronger. For her, the Avatar was not merely a spiritual guide, but a judge. The world needed someone who could act decisively when others faltered, someone who could cut through lies, corruption, and chaos. Her methods were often criticized. Some accused her of brutality, of being too quick to execute justice, but others praised her for protecting the innocent when governments and kings would not. Unlike avatars who sought compromise, Kyoshi sought resolution, and resolution often came at the edge of her fans, with earth-shattering force behind them. Kyoshi's place in the cycle. Kyoshi's reign cast a long shadow over her successors. Her unyielding nature and direct methods contrasted starkly with the more diplomatic approaches of avatars like Roku or Aang. For centuries, people invoked her name, a symbol of strength. Even in Aang's time, when the Kyoshi warriors defended their island, their painted faces and disciplined movements reminded the world of her indomitable spirit. Her voice continued to echo through the Avatar line. When Aang and Korra sought counsel from past avatars, Kyoshi's advice was always blunt, uncompromising, and rooted in her core belief that sometimes, to preserve peace, the Avatar must deliver justice with decisive action. Closing reflection. Kyoshi represents the opposite of Kirik's tragedy. She did not die young or leave her legacy misunderstood. She lived long, acted decisively, and ensured her vision of justice endured through centuries. Her island, her warriors, and her philosophy survived far beyond her own life, and yet her story also carries a warning. Power, endurance, and uncompromising justice can preserve balance, but they can also leave little room for compassion or reconciliation. Kyoshi embodied the Avatar at its most fearsome, the hand of justice, the will of the earth, and the unyielding reminder that the Avatar is not always a negotiator, but sometimes an executioner. Her towering figure, both literal and symbolic, continues to stand as one of the most iconic images in the entire Avatar cycle. Few avatars have left a mark as enduring, and fewer still have shaped the world so profoundly. After the towering legacy of Avatar Kyoshi, the cycle turned once more. This time to the Fire Nation. The new Avatar was born into an era of prosperity, but also into a nation whose ambitions were beginning to grow dangerous. This Avatar would become known as Roku, a man of great wisdom and power, but also a man whose deepest flaw lay in his own heart, his loyalty to friendship. Even when that friendship threatened the balance of the entire world, Roku's story is tragic in a very different way from Kirik's. Kirik was taken young by circumstances he could not control, while Roku lived long enough to see his choices set the stage for a century of suffering. He was a capable avatar, deeply spiritual, and immensely powerful, but when the moment came to choose between his duty to the world and his loyalty to a friend, he hesitated. That hesitation cost millions their lives. A childhood in the Fire Nation. Roku was born into a noble Fire Nation family more than 100 years before the events of Avatar, The Last Airbender. From the start, his life was intertwined with another boy of equal standing, Sozin, the crown prince of the Fire Nation. The two were inseparable, more like brothers than friends. They sparred together, studied together, and dreamed together. Their bond was so strong that when Roku's identity as the Avatar was revealed, Sozin celebrated it as if it were his own destiny. This childhood bond, however, would become the seed of tragedy. When Avatar Roku fell, the world plunged into shadow. The Fire Nation, guided by Sozin's ruthless ambition, launched a war of conquest that would burn for 100 years. Amid that devastation, the Avatar cycle turned once more. From the ashes of Roku's failure, the world would gain a savior, a boy destined to end the war, restore balance, and become a legend. Avatar Aang. Aang's story is unlike any other avatars. While most avatars spend their youth preparing for the responsibilities of their role, Aang was thrust into his destiny too soon. His tale is one of loss and rebirth, of innocence tested by unimaginable responsibility, and of a child who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. A child of the air. Nomadsong was born into the peaceful, spiritual society of the air. Nomads, a people who lived in harmony with nature and believed in detachment from worldly concerns. From his earliest days, Aang embodied the air nomad way, joyful, playful, and free-spirited. Unlike other avatars who often discovered their identity in adolescence, Aang's was revealed early. The monks recognized the signs, his natural connection to the spiritual world, his exceptional airbending talent, and the toys he selected in a traditional test that mirrored his past lives. At just 12 years old, Aang was told he was the Avatar, years earlier than tradition dictated. The reason was fear. The Fire Nation was growing increasingly aggressive, and the monks hoped to prepare Aang quickly. But in their haste, they placed on him a burden too heavy for a child, the weight of destiny. At first, Aang tried to embrace his role, but he was still just a boy. He wanted to play with his friends, ride on his flying bison Appa, and explore the world. The more the monks pressured him, the more isolated he felt. His peers began to treat him differently, no longer as Aang the boy, but Aang the Avatar. His best friend, Monk Gyatso, was the only one who truly understood him. Gyatso tried to shield Aang from responsibility, reminding him that childhood should not be stolen by destiny. But the pressure mounted until Aang overheard plans to separate him from Gyatso, sending him away for accelerated training. Heartbroken and afraid, Aang did the unthinkable. He ran away. The storm and in the iceberg Aang's escape took him and Appa far from the Southern Air Temple, but fate had other plans. A fierce storm battered them, and in desperation, Aang entered the Avatar state for the first time. His power shielded both him and Appa, encasing them in an iceberg. There, frozen in time, the Avatar slept, while he remained trapped. The Fire Nation struck. Sozin unleashed his comet-powered armies, wiping out the air nomads in a single, genocidal blow. By the time Aang emerged from the ice 100 years later, his people were gone. The last Airbender Aang was discovered by siblings from the Southern Water Tribe, Katara and Sokka, who freed him from the ice. At first, he appeared to them as nothing more than a curious boy with a flying bison. But soon they realized the truth. He was the long-lost Avatar, returned at the moment the world needed him most. For Aang, the revelation was devastating. He learned that while he slept, the Fire Nation had nearly conquered the world, and the air nomads had been exterminated. He was now truly the last Airbender. This knowledge filled him with grief and guilt. His decision to run away had left the world without its protector, and in that void, countless lives had been lost. The reluctant Horthao burdened with guilt, Aang was still a child at heart. He loved penguin sledding, playing with animals, and exploring. He resisted the idea of being a weapon of war, insisting that he was just Aang. But with Katara and Sokka by his side, he began to accept his destiny. Together, the three set out on a journey across the world. Aang would need to master waterbending, earthbending, and firebending before confronting the Fire Lord and ending the war. Along the way, they faced pursuit by Prince Zuko, the banished son of Fire Lord Azai, whose mission to capture the Avatar became a personal obsession. Despite Zuko's relentless pursuit, Aang's compassion often shone through. He saw his enemies not just as obstacles, but as people capable of change. This outlook would later prove crucial. The burden of loss throughout his journey, Aang struggled with the weight of being the last of his kind. He returned to the Southern Air Temple only to discover the skeleton of Monk Gyatso, his beloved guardian, surrounded by fallen Fire Nation soldiers. The sight broke him, triggering the Avatar state in an explosion of grief. Over and over, Aang was reminded of what had been taken from him. But these moments of pain also deepened his resolve. He vowed not only to defeat the Fire Nation, but also to preserve what remained of the world's cultures, so no one else would suffer what he had. Mastering the elements Aang's path toward mastery was arduous. Waterbending, under Katara's guidance at the Northern Water Tribe, Aang learned quickly, though his playful nature often clashed with the seriousness of his teachers. Earthbending, from Toph Beifong, a blind but ingenious earthbender, he learned not only the art of earthbending but also lessons in stubbornness, patience, and strength. Firebending, this was the most difficult. After a tragic accident in which Aang lost control and burned Katara, he swore off firebending in fear of himself. Only later, under the reluctant mentorship of Zuko, now his ally, did he truly master it. Through these lessons, Aang grew not just in skill, but in wisdom. Each element taught him something about balance: water's adaptability, earth's resilience, fire's drive, and air's freedom. The Avatar Statiang's greatest weapon and greatest curse was the Avatar state. In this heightened form, he could channel the power and knowledge of all his past lives. But the Avatar state also came with a price. If Aang were killed while in it, the Avatar cycle would end forever. Mastering this power required immense spiritual growth. He struggled with it, often losing control, until he sought guidance from past avatars, especially Roku and Kyoshi, each offering wisdom shaped by their own lives. A boy's heart despite the war, Aang's humanity remained. His bond with Katara deepened into love, though he often feared that his feelings would be a distraction from his duty. His friendships with Sokka, Toph, Appa, and Momo gave him strength, reminding him that he was not alone. It was this love and compassion, more than raw power, that defined Aang. Unlike many of his predecessors, who solved problems with decisive force, Aang sought harmony and understanding. Even with his enemies, the final battle at the end of his journey, Aang faced his greatest challenge. Fire Lord Azai, empowered by Sozin's comet, the world expected the Avatar to kill Azai, ending his tyranny once and for all. But Aang resisted. His air nomad upbringing, rooted in non-violence, forbade him from taking a life. The tension between duty and morality nearly broke him. Could he preserve his principles while saving the world? In the climactic battle, Aang unlocked his full avatar state, overwhelming Azai, yet in the final moment, he chose another path. Using the ancient art of energy bending, he stripped Azai of his firebending instead of killing him. By doing so, Aang not only ended the war, but also redefined what it meant to be the Avatar. Legacy of peace. With the war over, Aang dedicated his life to rebuilding. He helped form the United Republic of Nations, a land where people of all nations could live together. He preserved their nomad culture, teaching his children and students the values of his people, yet his life was not without struggle. The scars of war remained, and the weight of his role never left him. Still, he proved that compassion could triumph over violence, and that the Avatar need not be a destroyer, but a healer. The philosophy of Aang's life embodies the tension between duty and morality. Unlike Roku, who chose loyalty over duty, Aang refused to compromise his principles even when the world demanded it. His refusal to kill Azai was not weakness, but strength, the strength to create a new way. He showed that the Avatar's role is not just to maintain balance through power, but to embody the possibility of peace. In him, the Avatar cycle gained a figure of hope. Closing reflection. Aang's story is one of tragedy and triumph. He was a boy who lost his entire people, who carried the guilt of a century's suffering, and who faced expectations far beyond his years. Yet he rose to the challenge, not by abandoning who he was, but by embracing it. He proved that joy, compassion, and forgiveness could change the world as surely as fire, earth, water, and air. His legacy endured not only through his actions, but through his descendants and the new Avatar who would follow him. Korra, the next bridge between worlds. From Wan, the first to master the elements, to Korra, the modern Avatar who bridged spirit and human once more, the story of the Avatar is not simply a tale of heroes. It is a mirror of humanity itself, of our strengths, our flaws, our compassion, and our ambition. Each Avatar carried the weight of the world in their time. Some succeeded gloriously, like Kyoshi and Aang, while others stumbled beneath the burden, like Kirik and Roku, but none were defined solely by victory or failure. They were all human, and it was their humanity that made them great. When taught us that choices matter, even when made in desperation. Kyoshi proved that justice sometimes demands strength sharper than mercy. Kirik showed that even heroes can be haunted by what they cannot control. Roku revealed the danger of love that blinds one from duty. Aang reminded us that peace is strongest when it grows from compassion, not fear. And Korra, the bridge between old and new, showed that the Avatar must always adapt, never clinging to the past at the expense of the future. The Avatar cycle is not a story with an ending. It is a living legacy, a reminder that balance is never permanent, that harmony must be fought for again and again with each new generation. The Avatars rise, they fall, and they rise again. In them, the world continues. And so, though their stories are written, the Avatar's work is never truly finished. For as long as the cycle turns, there will always be another Avatar to learn, to stumble, to grow, and to carry the flame of balance into a world that will always need it.